Now, if you couldn't already tell, I'm a massive Lupin III fan, and because of that I like going online and looking how other people feel about the series. But recently I've noticed a trend, and that is while the anime has a load of fucking videos going into it on like every single fucking frame of animation, like Jesus Christ, this video is longer than the actual movie is fucking talking about. The manga on the other hand is legit just pure silence, like no one has fucking talked about this shit in depth. So that's where I'm gonna change that. I already got 4 manga series to look over and a very questionable manga author to look into, so let's start on the Lupin III Manga Retrospective overview, whatever the fuck you want to call it. So before going into the manga, we should have a quick look at the guy that's behind all of it, and I don't know how to pronounce that name. Kato Kazuhiko. Kato Kazuhiko? Kato Kazuhiko. Kato Kazuhiko? Kato Kazuhiko. Whatever the fuck that is. I'll just call him Kato from here on. Kato was born May 26, 1937. He started drawing manga in high school where he did strips for the school newspaper. After graduating, he then moved to Tokyo to look for work, and then began going to a technical school for electronics, and then he continued to draw as like a pastime during all that. After a while, he was recruited by Futabasha, and on August 10th, 1967, in the first issue of Weekly Magazine, the first Lupin III series made its debut. The series is heavily based on the French Arsène Lupin novel from 1905, being about the Japanese grandson of Arsène that goes on to carry the family business, that being theft. While writing the series, his editor suggested that he use the pen name Monkey Punch for shits and giggles. Kato didn't like this name at all, he fucking hated it, but he said, hell, might as well use it since Lupin III would probably only last like 2, 3 months, 4 months at most. That was not the case, and he ended up being stuck with this name for the rest of his life. Fun fact, but after finishing the Lupin III manga, the dude actually went on to become a professor of manga and animation at Otome University. Here's a clip of one of his lessons. 簡単にルパン書きますけど、例えばルパンの場合、こう書くでしょ。それでね、どっかの部分を消すんだって。Just found that interesting, to be honest. Anyways, now is probably a good time to start into the original 1967 manga, and what better place to start than the first chapter? First of all, the artwork for this chapter is an example of this weird trend I've just noticed that will go on for the rest of the original manga, and that's how Lupin is just not prominent in the covers at all. Usually the covers will have like Fujiko or whatever warming up the chapter as like the centerpiece, and then Lupin will just be dying in the corner. Like the dude got electrocuted, hit by a truck, shot 5-6 times, shot to pieces, froze to death. Like Jesus Christ, the dude could not catch a break. This isn't really important at all, like this is just something I've noticed and I kind of thought it was funny. Also, this like funny Lupin dying on the cover art trend is only in the Japanese release of the manga for some reason, who knows why. In like later releases of the manga, they just completely chopped out all this artwork and replaced them with some new illustrations of Lupin. I don't know why they've done that, but there it is. Sorry for the rant. Back to the first chapter. This chapter has a few interesting ideas and a few god-awful ideas, which will be an indication for the quality of the rest of this manga. So let's go through it one by one. The story starts in a college party where a murder has just taken place. My guy, Detective Zenigata, has just came in and reveals that Lupin is after something and that the murder could potentially be related to him, but he doesn't really know for sure and he kind of doubts it. He also doesn't know what Lupin looks like yet, because this is the first chapter in the manga. Sorry if I kind of missed over that whole wee plot point there. But this means that everyone in the building is sus. This creepy wee shit of a professor comes into the scene with his daughters, saying that Lupin is after some type of data that is hidden in a microchip that he made. Alright, that all sounds good so far, but this is where the problems come in. Alright, so this guy claiming to be Lupin comes in out of nowhere, assaults the professor's daughter, and then finds the microchip hidden up her vagina. And this is where the most infamous part of the manga comes in, that being Monkey Punch is a dirty bastard. Like, I swear to God, almost every chapter in this early half of the manga will contain some form of essay, which, first of all, the way it's portrayed just isn't that acceptable. It wasn't acceptable back then, it definitely isn't acceptable today, like, you know what I mean? Second of all, because of how often it's done, like, I'm not joking, every single fucking chapter. Every single chapter, it is so tiring, and it's just lazy writing. It just gets to the point where it's just lazy writing, especially when most of these chapters, it's like it's the only way it ever fucking moves forward. You know what I mean? Let's just throw in a wee sex scene here, just to get things going, you know what I mean? It's fuck off. Like, out the gate, this is one of the reasons why I think this early manga has just aged like complete balls. But we'll get into the rest of that later. Anyways, back to this chapter. After the whole, like, vagina microchip revelation that just went on, the real Lupin then comes in and shoots the fake one. And then he tries to make an escape and then he ends up getting arrested. That's it. Alright, so overall, aside from that whole father hiding microchip up his daughter's pussy hole and all that, this was an interesting first chapter. I'll give it that. It was interesting. It gives us a look at the two main characters, that being Lupin and Zettigata. And then it shows off the unique look that the early manga has. I'll say that. It's unique. It's definitely unique. Now, it's obvious that Monkey Punch had not fully figured out his art style yet for this series, as the original idea was to go for like a more American Mad Magazine type of look, instead of like the traditional Japanese anime one. But to me, at least, I don't know how some other people would feel. To me, anyways, the art just looks messy. And like he hasn't fully figured out a consistent look for the characters. The characters just look completely different every panel. I don't know what was going on. This is something that will evolve throughout the rest of the series and will definitely improve, and I'll point that out when that happens. But overall, I find this chapter to just be really rough. Like, sure, there's ideas that I like about this chapter, such as the 4 fall breaks and hiding Lupin's identity to like the very last page. But that doesn't change the fact that it's rough, and that's kind of how I feel for the majority of this early manga. It's just rough. Another notable point of the manga compared to the anime is its tone. This shit is dark. Easily the darkest entry in the entire franchise, and it's not even close. The change of tone can especially be seen in Lupin, as the dude is a completely different character compared to the anime. Gone is the more Robin Hood-like character from the anime, and here comes fucking Manga Lupin, who's a borderline psychopath. Mass murder on multiple occasions, manipulation, torture, even more torture, assault, overall just a proper bastard. Like, what's odd though is that Lupin seems to be the only character that's changed so much compared to the anime. Jigen's pretty fucking chill as usual. Goemon is a wee bit more outgoing compared to the anime, and is a slight bit of a nonce. I'm not too sure what the hell is going on there. Fujiko's backstabbing as usual, and Zenigata's just here to fucking arrest Lupin. That's same deal as the anime, really. Now, when the manga originally started, it was a very story of the week type manga with no real overarching themes or plot points, but as the manga got extended past the original 3-month run that Monkey Punch had planned for, he must have thought that there was probably some kind of need to have some longer storylines and some longer themes. So this is where the manga really started to evolve here. Now, there are 17 arcs overall in this manga, but there are 4 in particular that I want to go over. But as a side note, for whatever reason, in the later releases of the manga, such as the English Tokyo Pop release, all of the chapters are out of order, which can make some of these arcs really confusing to read, because like one chapter would be way early in the manga and then the rest of it's like way later on. Like, as an example, in the Tokyo Pop release, Jigen doesn't get his proper introduction till like chapter 13, but he'd already been in the series since chapter 7, so what the hell's going on here? Well, it turns out that chapter 13 was originally chapter 10, and chapter 7 was originally chapter 14. You see what I mean? This is really confusing, and I don't understand why they've released it like that. If you want to read it in like the original Japanese order that makes sense, I'll have links in the description for like the Lupin wiki where it has all the proper orders and that. So anyways, on to the first arc. These are the chapters that go over Lupin's childhood and how he actually became a thief. Recently there was the Lupin Zero anime, which kind of covers a wee bit of these chapters and it kind of does its own thing, but if you want to see elements of this in like animation form, go watch that. But back onto the first chapter of this arc, and straight away you can see why Lupin came out the way he did in this manga, because holy shit, his grandfather had him tortured. This chapter has the original Arsène Lupin, after beating the ever-living shite out of his grandson, challenging him to see if he has the right to carry the family name. That challenge is to break into a mafia hideout and come out alive. Another condition of the challenge is that if Lupin dies, his heart will be transferred to his grandfather. Also, the grandfather hired like 20 odd hitmen to kill Lupin. Kinda wild if you ask me, like, from your grandfather, Jesus Christ. Other stories in this arc contains one after Lupin I has passed away, where Lupin III has to fight over the heritage with like these 4 other guys that just came in out of nowhere, and then the final story has Lupin meeting his father for the first time. Overall, I'd say this arc kinda marks the first real high point of the manga, as it's where the stories become more focused, and it's also where Monkey Punch decides to move away from like the Mad Magazine American look and instead go for something more Osamu Tezuka inspired. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. The guy that made Astro Boy. Which personally, I think this style fits the manga so much better than the original. It also just looks a whole lot cleaner now. The only real dodgy point of this arc was whatever the hell Lupin was doing in this image. Anyways, on to the next arc. You know the way earlier on in the video I said that like this portrayal of Lupin was a legit psychopath? Yeah, this arc is the perfect representation of that. Most of these chapters here will have Lupin completely lost in some type of hallucination or delusion, struggling to do pretty much anything, and then constantly breaking the fourth wall by calling Monkey Punch a dickhead for putting him through all this shit. Actually, one very notable fourth wall break is when Lupin calls out Monkey Punch on his lazy writing for only using sex scenes to progress the story. So the dude himself knew this was a problem. You wonder why the dude couldn't just fucking like, I don't know, notice that this was getting really repetitive and actually change it instead of just calling himself a dickhead for it. You know what I mean? Anyway, wacky shit with like no explanation has always been a staple in the Lupin franchise, and these chapters are some of the earliest examples of the series just going fucking batshit crazy. A woman that can completely tear off her skin, a skull man that seems to know everything that's gonna happen, and Lupin having an actual mental breakdown and being institutionalized. I think the final chapter in this arc might be the wildest, with Lupin being split in half between his good side and his evil side becoming 2 different people, and the only way they can become whole again is for them to strip naked and run into each other. I think what's funny is that Lupin's good side is just as much of a dickhead as his evil side, so I really don't know what they were trying to go for here. Overall, just some wild storylines, and I think this departure from like all the mafia and like theft-based storylines is what makes these chapters stand out. You know what I mean? These chapters put Lupin against a group called the Rat Clan, with each chapter putting Lupin against a different member of the clan. Personally, I think the last 2 chapters of this arc is really where this original manga gets its time to shine. Like, some really like amazing looking artwork in these chapters, especially in the Rat Clan in the Sea chapter. This one has some gorgeous looking like widespread pages of the sea and all that, and it looks banging. Like, the last chapter, called Old Acquaintance Being Shot, might actually be the best chapter in this entire manga, with great pacing, these super cinematic looking panels, and just an amazing conclusion. It's just the best that this style of Lupin has to offer. No more to say, to be honest, just quality shit all around. Now on to the last manga that I want to discuss for this manga. The New Adventures is the final segment of the manga, and it kind of works as like a transitional period between the original style that has been used up to this point and the new one that Monkey Punch will then stick to for the rest of his career. This means moving away from the more gritty art style and darker storylines from previously, and now it's a more cartoony comedy based manga. Personally, I think this simplification is easily for the better, and I'm glad this is the style Monkey Punch will stick to from this point onwards. These chapters are a lot more straight to the point as well, with a lot less dialogue and more of a focus on telling the story through its artwork. This might not seem like a big deal, but one thing that I haven't really mentioned up to this point is how unbelievably confusing this manga has been up to this point. Like, legit, there has been so many chapters where I have to just reread the entire thing because I have no idea what's happening. It's so messy and confusing, and sometimes the chapters don't even have proper conclusions. I've seen other people have experiences like this where they've came out of this manga like, what the fuck was even happening most of the time, so it's not just a me thing. So I think simplifying this, taking away all the dialogue and just having comedy based, that is a change that is very appreciated. Now, when it comes to the quality of the New Adventures, I think it was pretty solid overall. I think the only section of it I didn't like was Thief's Family Hamlet, purely because it wasn't that interesting of a story. Like, even when that exact story got adapted in part 1, it was easily the weakest episode out of the lot. So aside from that, this was a really great section of the manga, and it kind of marks where Monkey Punch found his footing. And that's really all I have to say on this original manga. Overall, while it does have some highlights, I would still consider it to be a mixed bag. And while I do think a lot of the flaws do just come from it being like the first entry in the franchise and not really finding its way yet, I do believe most of it has just aged badly. And I don't think I have to explain why at this point. I think I've already went in depth enough on that. Sadly, I don't think this is a manga I could truly recommend to anyone. To be honest, I think the only reason why you would ever go back to this manga is to see how the Lupin franchise started, and that's about it. Though I would love to see another attempt at like the darker style that Monkey Punch was going for here, because I don't think that has really been done in the same way that it has been done in this manga. You know what I mean? All in all, I'd probably give this manga like a 5 to a 6 out of 10. Which might seem like a low note to start on, but believe me, it gets so much better from here. On to the next manga. Alright, so I know I said I'd be moving on to the next manga, but there was actually a couple of one-shots that was released in between the two series that I really want to cover first. The first one is Lupin III Gaiden, and this is fucking awesome. I think the best way to describe it would be like all of the strongest aspects of the original manga wrapped up into one chapter. I absolutely love the gritty artwork in this one and how bleak everything looks. Shit like this is where like the black and white prints of manga actually makes like for the better choice, you know what I mean? It actually makes it look more aesthetic and more like cinematic. Now, there's no real point in going too in depth on the story of this one, as there's only one chapter that takes like 8 or 9 minutes to read. But for a very, very quick summary, Zenigata has potentially been assassinated, and Lupin wanting revenge goes on this fucking deranged hunt for his killer. Overall, I think this style and tone kinda makes for like the perfect epilogue that the original manga never got but like desperately needed. So honestly, I get this like a 10 out of 10. If you're gonna read anything I've discussed so far in this video, please make it this. Don't really have much to say on this one, so I'll make it quick. This chapter puts two Jigans against each other in a shootout, one real, one fake. Overall, it's a pretty solid chapter, but nothing too crazy. I think the most notable thing about this one shot is actually the history behind it. This chapter was printed during the airing of part 2. It was kind of advertised as like a competition between the manga and the anime to see which one can make a better rendition of the same story. In my opinion, I think the anime did this story better overall, but it's still a good chapter. Can't take that away from it, you know what I mean? So 7 out of 10 overall. Not much to say on this one, aside from the funny ending. Like, it's pretty much just a very weak new adventures chapter. Also, Lupin's like a proper creep in this one, so that takes it down by a few points. I give this like 4 or 5 out of 10. And that's kind of it for the one-shots. On to the next manga for real this time. This manga follows Lupin Jr., the illegitimate son of Lupin III, as he basically does the same thing that his father did, being a thief. This manga was pretty short, only really again like 2 volumes with 18 chapters in total. Overall, it's a decent read, but I wouldn't say you're missing out on much if you decide to skip over it. Most notable points of this series is the shift away from the darker tone and the constant essay, thank God, and also the continued improvement of Monkey Punch's art style. Quality wise, I wouldn't really say there's any real high points or low points. It's just kind of like consistently like decent enough, which isn't bad as it's still got a few laughs out of me, but I just don't really find many of the chapters to be all that memorable. I think the only real standout chapter in the whole series is like the first one, where he faces off against Lupin III. Other than that, I can't really say much else about this. I'm sorry if I'm repeating that a lot, but there's really just not much else to say here. Read it if you're interested in checking out all Monkey Punch's work. Otherwise, you're right to skip out on this. I'd probably give this like 5 out of 10. On to the next series. Shin Lupin III, or World's Most Wanted as it's called in English, is the sequel to the Lupin III manga series. This series is more focused on the more comedy approach of the later manga rather than the darker style of the earlier stuff. Because of that, this is easily the most comedy based Lupin manga, with each chapter really just being like an 18-page build up to like the last panel. This means that almost all the chapters are completely episodic with very little connections to the next or previous, with the exception of like a couple of 2-parters here and there. This is pretty much the case for the entire run of the manga, until the last like year or 2 where they start to introduce 3 storylines. Those being the Francisco series, Yapland series, and the Bad City series. Though again, that is until like 160 odd chapters into the manga, so it's mainly the more episodic stories you're looking at. Personally, I think that's for the better, as the quality of this manga is 100 times more consistent than it ever was in the original manga. And also, this manga is fucking hilarious. Every single chapter at least got a chuckle out of me, which is something that other animes and mangas kind of struggle to do, so that's why my praises are going to be very high for this one. One thing I will mention about this manga is that while it thankfully has far less of all the more questionable aspects of the original, there is far more nudity overall, but not in the way you might think. I don't know what sudden twist in Monkey Punch's head needed to happen for him to suddenly just start drawing Lupin's cock in every other page. But he does, and he does it constantly. No, he doesn't draw it as like a literal cock, instead he draws it as like the male sex symbol. Whether that's for better or for worse is for you to decide. Now, I can't really talk about this manga in the same amount of depth as the original, mainly because of the episodic structure of the majority of its chapters. And while there are 3 arcs at the end of the manga, so far only one of them has actually gotten an English translation. Even then, it's a fan translation, so the latest shit has never gone an official translation, and I doubt it will. So before I dive into the one arc that did get a translation, I thought it might be fun to just go into a couple of my favorite chapters real quick. Let's get into it. Chapter 12 focuses on this guy who had previously tricked Lupin out of some type of money using plastic surgery to then hide away from Lupin. And can I just say, like, shout out this man's surgeon. This dude was a fucking... this dude did a miracle, like. Anyway, the way that Lupin outsmarts this guy is really creative and fun, and the conclusion is absolutely hilarious. Chapter 23 has Jigen face off against this gunman who he had like previous beef with. It has this cool idea of Jigen needing to repair his gun throughout the entire fight, and then only really having like one bullet to finish the job. It's just a pretty quality gunfight chapter, and it's also the only time in the entire franchise that Jigen's really known to have a girlfriend in, for whatever reason. On to the next one. Chapter 57 has Lupin going into this boxing match, as the prize is the key to get Jigen and Goemon out of this trap. This chapter is a highlight just because of how quickly Lupin loses at every single round. This dude cannot fight for the life of him, like. And even after the dude just gives up and he steals the prize anyways, the prize ends up being like a jigsaw puzzle, so he needs to figure out this puzzle to break Jigen and Goemon out, and he completely fucks it up and loses all the pieces. So this chapter just doesn't have a conclusion. Chapter 128 has Lupin attempting to defeat this guy that's out of reach, but he's just completely unable to. He tries a whole bunch of shit, but like none of it really works out. But then he has the genius idea to use his condoms of all things, so he blows up a condom with some type of weapon to kill the Donnie, and he fucking kills him. Chapter 87 has this girl following around Lupin out of his will because she wants to experience what it's like to be a thief. I'm not going to say too much about this chapter, but I will say this is like one of the few like really serious chapters, and the conclusion might be the most like emotional segment in this entire manga. And that's everything for my favorite manga chapters. Sorry if I went over that a bit quickly. I don't want this video to drag out any longer than it already has. So let's just get straight on to the Francisco arc. For a quick summary, this arc has Lupin going against a group called the Secret Seven, a group that is connected to both the police and the mafia and has like a hidden base on the Alcatraz. The main antagonist of this arc is Inspector Stormo, who's like a proper bastard that'll do anything for what he wants. The main difference between him and other Lupin villains is that he actually kind of has the upper hand over Lupin, being one of the few times in this whole manga that Lupin's actually like not sure if he's going to make it out of the situation or like have the advantage in the situation. This is most apparent at the end of the first encounter, where Stormo stabs Lupin in the eye. And this isn't like other parts of the manga where Lupin somehow finds a way to like counter-attack or whatever. No, that eye is gone. And from this point onward in the arc, Lupin now wears an eye patch. Having that alone makes this arc stand out, as while it might seem small, this is actually one of the few times in the whole franchise that Lupin has actually faced like a real consequence for like messing with the wrong guy. I'm not going to go too in depth in the rest of the arc, as I think you should really just go in and read it for yourselves. But what I will say is that it's easily the best storyline Monkey Punch has written so far in this manga, and probably overall in this manga. And it's a shame that I never got official translation or anything. And that's all I really have to say on the Shin Lupin manga. Since the rest of the series is still yet to be translated, it kind of just ends things awkwardly here like. Overall, I think this manga is a strong, strong improvement over the original. To me at least, I feel like this is probably the definitive Lupin manga, and not that it's like the end all be all best Lupin manga. I think it's just the most consistent, and because there's the most amount of chapters, and I think because the art style is kind of at its best here, it's kind of the definitive Lupin manga overall. So I'd probably give it like an 8 out of 10, maybe a 9 out of 10. There are, while it is more consistent, there is still a few stinkers in there, if you know what I mean. Nothing as bad as the original manga, but there still is a few like stinkers. So I'll probably give it like an 8 out of 10 overall. Now on to Monkey Punch's final Lupin manga, which is Sexy Lupin III. This is the shortest Lupin manga, with only 7 chapters released in 1984, and I think one might have came out in 85, don't quote me on that. This series was mainly made just to help promote the anime's third series, Part 3. Unlike the previous mangas in this video that were written purely by Monkey Punch, like Monkey Punch did the writing, the artwork, everything, this manga brought in a couple of additional writers from Part 3 to co-write some of the chapters. So while Monkey Punch mainly handled all of the artwork and then a couple of the stories, there was a few other writers doing some of the other ones. Now, a slight contradiction to what I just said, but technically this series is actually 5 chapters and 2 one-shots. I'm not sure why they split it up like this, because they were all released around the same time, but I might as well just look at the one-shots first. This chapter starts within the bar, where Lupin suddenly breaks in, making the announcement that he's like in town and all that, shoots the place up and then dips. From there, Lupin attempts to steal this like book of secrets from like the corrupt leader of the town. First thing you'll notice about this chapter is the huge upgrade in artwork and the amount of detail that is poured into these panels. It's like the perfect outcome of the style that Monkey Punch had been working since like the New Adventures, which came out like 2 decades beforehand. The story for this chapter is also pretty solid, with a couple of funny moments and a solid ending that kind of ties everything up quite nicely. Like the Lupin Gaiden one-shot from earlier on in the video, I would also strongly recommend this one-shot. I probably haven't done the surface side, but this one-shot's absolutely amazing. So probably like 9 or 10 out of 10. The story for this chapter is pretty straightforward. Like, Lupin and Jigen basically just work together to break Fujiko out of this women's prison. I'll be honest, I don't really have much to say about this chapter other than that it's pretty solid and basically has all the elements you really want in a Lupin story, so 8 out of 10. Now for the main 5 chapters of Sexy Lupin III. And I'll just say this straight away, even with its short length, this might actually be the best Lupin manga quality wise. The artwork is absolutely amazing and is easily the best the Lupin franchise has ever seen up to this point. The artwork has a lot more like dynamic shots than usual and a lot more like perspective changes with the characters going on, and also have like characters like coming out of the panels and shit. It's just all that fun stuff. It's absolutely amazing. Now this is probably because the series had 3 writers instead of 1, but story wise these are the absolute best the Lupin manga has seen so far, with Sentimental Night might actually being my favourite Lupin chapter period. This could also like with the artwork earlier, this could be because like Monkey Punch had a lot more time to focus on the artwork while the other writers were coming up with the stories. Just thought I should put that in. What I will say about this manga though, and the title of the series might make it obvious, but the amount of nudity in the series is wild. Some of these chapters are borderline to just straight up hentai with the shit that happens, and I doubt I'll be able to show any of it, but it's wild. I think one of the chapters started off with Lupin having a shag on a surfboard. I don't know what was going on there. Like, you know, sometimes it's actually mad to think this is the same guy that was supposed to be from fucking Castle of Cagliostro, like. Though thankfully it doesn't have any of the questionable, slightly NTR, assaulty shit that was in the original manga. It shouldn't have been there in the first place, like, but I'm glad that's an improvement that's happened, and it's gone now, so thank God. But overall, I think this was like an amazing final installment for the Lupin manga. It kind of felt like everything Monkey Punch had been working on for like the past 30 years of the Lupin manga had built up to this point, so that makes it like another strong recommendation for me. 10 out of 10. And that's pretty much everything Monkey Punch had worked on for the Lupin manga. I think the only thing he did after Sexy Lupin was like a very short promotional one-shot for like some type of event going on in Italy during the 90s, but that was really it. Monkey Punch's work went on to have a long-lasting legacy, inspiring other works such as Cowboy Bebop, Fooly Cooly, and a whole lot more that I'm not even going to go into since this video's already went on long enough. There's a lot more Lupin videos out there on the internet that goes into far better detail on Monkey Punch's influence far better than I could, so I'll just give links to that. I know the title of the video and the clickbait and all that, but fuck it. Also, if you want to read anything that was featured in this video, I'll have links in the description to where you can buy or read the manga online. Though I will say there was a classic collection released by 7 Seas, and that's pretty much the best you're going to get. The original Lupin like English translations are so rare and so overpriced, you're not going to be able to find them. You're just not. So get the classic collections, even though it doesn't have most of the chapters. It only has like a couple of ones, and even then some of the quality's a bit iffy, but that's kind of your go-to place really. Anyways, if you stuck around for this long and you want to see more content like this, subscribing will be a great help. I'm still new to this whole YouTube thing and I'm a bit confused on where to take this channel, so any type of feedback would really be a great way to start. And that's it really. Thanks for watching and have a good one.
La